Hello, my name is Stephen Brown, and I'm an attorney with Reddy & Newman PC in Houston, Texas. With me is one of our senior H-1B attorneys, Justin Rivera. We're here to follow up on our topic from a couple weeks ago, discussing unauthorized work, with a topic related to that regarding short-term placement. In today's society, a lot of employees have to move their project location on a short-term basis for a few weeks at a time before coming back. Thankfully, the Department of Labor has provided short-term placement guidelines that must be followed in order to not participate in unauthorized work.
That's correct, Stephen. And short-term placement comes up a lot, especially in IT consulting, because as a consultant, you have to move from one location to another based on the project. So, Stephen, what exactly is short-term placement?
Yeah, so short-term placement is when the employee is required to go to a new job site on a short-term placement period. It's usually 30 days, but it can be up to 60 days as long as they can show ties to the home work site. This is a work authorization where they can go to that new location without doing a new LCA on this temporary basis.
Okay.
So, Justin, are there obligations employers must follow if they're going to participate in the short-term placement option?
Yes, they are. For one, they're required to pay the required wage, which is going to be based on the new worksite location. While they're there, because this is temporary, they're also required to pay the employees lodging, travel, and meals as well. So, Stephen, what would be an example of somebody employing short-term placement correctly versus someone employing short-term placement incorrectly?
Yeah, so it correctly applied, the way I view it is if someone's, let's say, working for an end client in Houston, Texas, and that end client has some work that needs to be done up in Washington, D.C. for a couple of weeks. Mm-hmm. So the company says, hey, consultant, we need you to go to Washington, D.C. for a couple of weeks, and then coming back to Houston after that time period's up. That, to me, is how the Department of Labor views short-term placement. Mm-hmm. What I think gets into a problem is a lot of employers try to justify not filing an amendment timely by doing short-term placement. They'll put someone on a project, see how it goes for about a month, get a longer purchase order, and then file the amendment, justifying it with short-term placement. I think what Department of Labor really looks at is what's the intent, and if the intent's to go and then come back, that's short-term placement. Mm-hmm. If the intent is to go and stay there, I don't think it's short-term placement.
Okay, so Stephen, how about I posit to you a hypothetical and you tell me whether it is or is not permissible short-term placement?
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Okay, so in a lot of these H-1B petitions for IT consulting companies, there is a period of review that's typically done by the end client or the vendor, in which, let's say, there's 14 days in which they review the performance of the individual and decide whether or not they want the individual to continue working there. So, going back to our previous example, if I'm an employee in Houston, Texas, and then I subsequently I'm assigned to a project in Washington, D.C., instead of my company filing an amendment, they send me up there under the guise of short-term placement. Would that be an appropriate use of short-term placement?
Yeah, in my opinion, no. I think again, it gets back to that intent. And right. Here you're looking to go to that project, test out that review period, hopefully get a longer purchase order, and then you're going to stay in D.C. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's short-term placement. Even though it does get under that 30 days, and even if the employer meets all those obligations, I still don't think it will because your intent is to stay there. If you're with client A in Houston and then you're going to DC for a 2-week project for company A and then coming back, that's short-term placement, but going on a trial basis to get a longer purchase order, I don't think is short-term placement.
Okay, so would it be correct then to conclude that in that situation, the better option is to file an amendment?
Yes, I would. I'd file the amendment, and at the end of the day, if you file the amendment and then that project doesn't work out, you can always withdraw it. You just need to file the amendment to have that work authorization for the time you're there. It doesn't have to get approved, so you can withdraw it later on if that project doesn't pan out.
Understood. Well, Stephen, thank you for taking time with us to explain that today, and I hope that everyone has a pleasant day.
Thank you all.